Today, a child might toss a pencil into a backpack without a second thought. In 1900, for one small girl in America, receiving her very first pencil felt like being handed the future. In the autumn of 1900, in a modest wooden schoolhouse on the edge of a farming town in Kansas, 8-year-old Clara Whitfield sat at a narrow desk carved with the initials of older siblings and cousins. The prairie wind pressed against the thin windows, and the potbelly stove in the corner gave off uneven warmth. Clara's boots were dusty from the long walk down a dirt road lined with cornfields that had just been harvested. She had carried a slate board to school for 2 years, carefully wiping it clean after every arithmetic problem. Paper was precious, books were shared, pencils were rare. At the turn of the 20th century, America was changing rapidly. The 1900 U.S. Census recorded nearly 76 million people, and public education was expanding, especially in rural states. Compulsory education laws were becoming more common, though enforcement varied. In farming communities like Clara's, children were often kept home during planting and harvest seasons. Many families questioned whether extended schooling was practical when labor was urgently needed. Clara's father, Thomas Whitfield, believed in education, though he had only completed the 8th grade himself. He had grown up in the aftermath of the Civil War, in a country struggling to rebuild and industrialize. Railroads stretched across the continent. Factories multiplied in cities like Chicago and Pittsburgh. Yet in rural Kansas, life still revolved around crops, weather, and community. The Whitfields were not wealthy. Their farmhouse had no electricity. Most rural homes would not see electric lines for decades. Water came from a hand pump. Even so, Clara's mother, Eliza, kept a small shelf of books near the kitchen table, a worn Bible, a volume of Shakespeare, and a McGuffey reader passed down from a relative. Clara traced the printed letters with her finger at night by lamplight, whispering the words softly so she would not wake her younger brothers. That October morning, their teacher, Miss Eleanor Harding, arrived with a small wooden box. Miss Harding was 22, recently trained at a normal school in Topeka, part of a growing movement to professionalize teaching. She wore her hair pinned tightly and carried herself with calm authority. The town respected her, though some parents still viewed female teachers as temporary workers until marriage. After the arithmetic lesson, Miss Harding opened the wooden box. Inside were freshly delivered graphite pencils, purchased through a county education fund. By 1900, pencil manufacturing had become more efficient thanks to advances in industrial production, but distribution to rural schools could still be slow. Many children relied entirely on slates because paper and pencils increased school expenses. Miss Harding called each student forward. When Clara's name was spoken, her heart pounded. She stepped carefully between desks. The pencil placed into her palm was smooth and pale yellow, its tip sharpened to a delicate point. She had used a pencil only once before, briefly borrowing one to copy a spelling word. Now she had one of her own. It was a small object, yet Clara felt its weight as something enormous. A slate could be erased in seconds. A pencil left marks that remained. Paper preserved thoughts. Words could travel beyond the classroom. From that day forward, Clara treated the pencil like treasure. She wrapped it in cloth at night. She practiced cursive letters until her fingers cramped. She copied passages from the McGuffey reader onto scrap paper her mother saved from old seed catalogs. Her handwriting improved quickly, earning praise from Miss Harding. Education for girls in 1900 America was improving, but expectations were still limited. Many girls left school by age 14. Teaching, however, was one of the few respectable professions open to women. By 1900, women made up nearly 3/4 of the nation's teachers, especially in elementary schools. The profession offered modest wages, but a rare form of independence. Clara began to imagine herself at the front of the classroom. She studied Miss Harding's posture, her tone, the way she explained fractions by slicing an apple into equal parts. She noticed how Miss Harding stayed after lessons to help younger students read aloud. In a town where opportunities for women were constrained, the teacher stood as a symbol of knowledge and quiet leadership. The winter of 1901 was especially harsh. Blizzards swept across the plains, and school closed for several weeks. During that time, Clara continued practicing by lamplight. She filled every scrap of paper she could find. When supplies ran low, her father traded eggs in town for a small stack of lined sheets. He told neighbors, half-jokingly, that his daughter might one day know more than all of us put together. As industrialization accelerated in America's cities, rural education advocates argued that farming communities needed educated citizens just as much as factories needed skilled workers. Agricultural bulletins emphasized literacy for understanding new machinery manuals and crop reports. Newspapers, increasingly affordable, carried national news into remote areas. Literacy meant connection to a broader world. By 1905, Clara had advanced farther than most girls in her town. At 15, she completed the highest grade offered locally. Rather than ending her education, she applied to attend a state normal school, determined to become a certified teacher. Tuition was low, but not insignificant. The Whitfields tightened their budget. Clara took in mending work to contribute. When she arrived at the normal school in Topeka, she was overwhelmed by the size of the brick buildings and the number of young women with similar ambitions. Courses included pedagogy, literature, arithmetic methods, and classroom management. Education was becoming more systematic, influenced by progressive reformers who believed structured schooling could uplift communities. Clara kept that first pencil in a small wooden box on her dormitory shelf. It was worn down to half its original size, but she refused to discard it. It reminded her of the moment she first believed her dreams were tangible. In 1908, diploma in hand, Clara Whitfield returned to a rural district not far from her childhood home. She stood before her own classroom of students, some barefoot, some shy, all curious. On the first day, she placed a box of pencils on her desk. She distributed them carefully, one by one, watching faces light up as hers once had. America in the early 20th century would face enormous changes: urban growth, World War I, women's suffrage, economic upheavals. Education would expand dramatically, and literacy rates would climb. But for Clara, the transformation began with something far simpler: a single pencil and a teacher who believed in placing it into her hand. Today, millions of children open backpacks filled with supplies. Few pause to consider how revolutionary those tools once were. In a wooden schoolhouse on the Kansas prairie, at the dawn of a new century, a small girl understood instinctively what that pencil meant. It was not just wood and graphite. It was possibility, permanence, and a promise that her voice, once written, could not easily be erased.